millions of gallons of highly energetic freshwater slamming into the ocean. Basic intuition suggests these massive volumes of water should instantly churn into a diluted, brackish soup, but they don't. This diagram maps the geography of that collision point. Here we see the fresh river flow driving directly into the saltwater sea. Right at the interface, the diagram highlights a stark line of demarcation. The two massive bodies of water touch, yet remain physically distinct. The driving mystery here is the invisible fluid mechanics holding back these immense forces and preventing them from surrendering to chaotic mixing. This delayed mixing was documented in texts centuries before the development of modern geophysics. The Quran describes this separation using the term Barzakh, a word that translates to a dynamic barrier. It pairs this with another specific term, hijr mahur, denoting a forbidden or quarantined partition. These historical terms describe a complex, measurable hydraulic front with structural precision. To understand exactly how this barrier functions, we have to pull back from the macro view and break down the fluid mechanics at the molecular level. We start on the ocean side. Its defining property is a high concentration of dissolved salt. This panel shows the equation of state for seawater density. It dictates that density is a function of salinity, temperature, and pressure. Looking closely, the math is straightforward. High salt content increases the overall mass of ocean water. When these two masses collide, that density difference dictates the architecture of the water column. The heavier marine water is forced to subduct beneath the lighter freshwater outflow. This creates a specific geometric structure known as the saline wedge. The salt water subducts aggressively, forming a physical ramp under the river current. This wedge establishes a strict vertical stratification. It separates the fluid masses by weight, cutting off the possibility of direct vertical mixing. Gravity-driven stratification, dictated entirely by these density differences, forms the foundation of this physical barrier. That stratification leaves us with a microscopic boundary line, where the top of the saltwater wedge physically grazes the bottom of the freshwater layer. Geophysicists call this boundary the halocline. This chart maps depth on the vertical axis against salinity on the horizontal. Following the curve, we see a sudden spike in salinity over a short vertical distance. It's a razor-thin transition zone. Inside that sharp transition, distinct chemical properties take over. Differing surface tensions and intermolecular forces create severe friction, allowing the massive fluid bodies to slide and grind without integrating. The halocline is the physical manifestation of the Barzakh, a dynamic, self-maintaining frontline that prevents either sea from overwhelming the other. Moving from fluid dynamics to biological impact, we have to look at how living organisms interact with this shimmering wall of water. For aquatic life, crossing the halocline is a lethal threat. It subjects a living cell to an immediate, extreme shift in surrounding salt concentration. The mechanism enforcing this boundary is osmotic pressure. This panel illustrates the effect, showing fish physically repelled at the red cross. The text notes that crossing causes cells to rapidly dehydrate and collapse, or absorb too much water and rupture. This biological absolute aligns exactly with the concept of a hijr mahur, a literal forbidden partition where marine and freshwater life are physically barred from crossing. The halocline functions as a necessary biological quarantine. It preserves two entirely distinct, highly specialized ecosystems existing mere inches apart. The barrier also acts on the millions of tons of inert, suspended sediment carried downstream by the river flow. The exact moment these river sediments collide with the marine salt barrier, they undergo a severe chemical shock. This panel shows the result. A massive change in ionic strength at the halocline forces suspended particles to rapidly coagulate. Becoming too heavy to remain suspended, they drop out, creating what is labeled here as the turbidity maximum. This turbidity maximum acts as a highly localized, highly efficient sediment trap, stopping particulate matter from washing out into the open ocean. This microscopic chemical dropout has a massive structural consequence. Over millennia, this precise entrapment mechanism piles up enough material to build entire coastal deltas out of the ocean floor. If we pull back from the microscopic chemical reactions, we can see the entire estuary machine functioning as a single cohesive unit. It is a standoff between the massive, crushing physical weight of the ocean's depth and the relentless kinetic pushing force of the river's flow. The physical principle governing this standoff is hydrostatic equilibrium. This graphic illustrates the math, the pressure of the freshwater perfectly balancing the pressure of the saltwater. This equilibrium isn't a frozen or static state. It is a violent, constant push and pull of fluid forces that manage to perfectly cancel each other out. The geographical stability of the entire coastal region relies entirely on this mathematical balancing act holding firm. If this barrier were to break down, the stakes are catastrophic. Unchecked saltwater intrusion would rapidly contaminate crucial coastal drinking aquifers and destroy surrounding agriculture. Furthermore, the sediment trap actively builds the land masses that act as critical shields, protecting inland populations from ocean storms and erosion. Looking closely at the mechanics, the ancient textual framing completely aligns with the modern geophysics. The historical descriptions of a dynamic barrier, the Barzakh, and a forbidden partition, the Hijr Mahur, map directly onto the strict physics of the halocline and the absolute limits of osmotic containment. Fluid dynamics proves the intersection of two seas is a protective, mathematically necessary boundary.